So, most people that play this game know that there are 4 spell lists in Pathfinder 2e. Arcane, Divine, Occult, and Primal. Most of the time, you can only get one of these spell lists. But what if you could cast spells from all lists? It's time for the Scrollslinger. For today's ancestry, we're going with the Sharp-Eared Catfolk. After all, we can't hit enemies with spells if we don't know where they are. And this will help us point out those enemies to our allies as well. And even do it as a free action. For background, pick what you want. It really doesn't matter. And of course, we're going with the Thaumaturge class. Those of you that have seen the feats that are from the Thaumaturge class probably saw that coming. But not only will the Thaumaturge allow us to use every scroll in the game, but it will also allow us to hit enemy weaknesses very easily. And for our first implement, we're going to be going with the Tome implement, obviously. Not only will this give us a bonus on our recall knowledge checks, but we get trained proficiency in 2 skills of our choice during daily preparations. These, of course, last until the end of the day and can't be used for a permanent character option. We have to be holding our tome to get the recall knowledge bonus. But we get the 2 extra skills as long as our tome is on our person. We don't have to be holding it then. And at higher levels, we get expert proficiency in one or both of those skills. The starting stats for this build should be Strength 10, Dexterity 14, Constitution 12, Intelligence 14, Wisdom 10, and Charisma 18. Our first class feat for this build is of course going to be Scroll Thaumaturge. This of course is the bread and butter of this build. We can activate scrolls of any magic tradition, and we use our Thaumaturge class DC rather than a spell DC. And we can draw and activate scrolls with the hand that our implement is in, much like other esoterica. And of course, at first level, we also get an ancestry feat. And we're going to go with Cat's Luck. This allows us to, once per day, re-roll a failed reflex save and use the better results. We'll talk about the other reason we're taking this later in this video, but for right now, it's always good to have an advantage on reflex saving throws, even if it is just once per day. For level 2, I've gone with Esoteric Warden. This will give us a bonus on our saving throws and our AC against creatures that we use exploit vulnerability on. Because having a little extra defense to keep us up is always a good thing. And then of course, for the free archetype, we're going to be taking the Eldritch Researcher dedication. So we get a occult or arcane cantrip of our choice, and a spell DC to cast that spell using our intelligence. We also automatically become an expert in arcana or occultism regardless of which spell we picked. And we get a +1 bonus to recall knowledge using whatever skill we picked to become experts, but only when investigating or identifying magic. Especially in the beginning, we're not going to have a huge amount of scrolls. So you're going to want to pick some kind of attack spell here. That way you have something to hit enemies with, other than your bow. More than likely you're going to pick an arcane spell here. Now for general feats, if you've been with the channel for a while, you probably know the 3 feats I'm going to say first. Toughness, Die Hard, and Canny Acumen for our reflex saves. Then this is a ranged build, so you'll want to pick up Fleet for a little more speed. And then you'll want to pick up Expeditious Search. That'll make it easier for us to search for scrolls that we need for this build. For level 4, I've gone with Paired Link. So we pick an ally and perform a small ceremony with them. From that point on, during that day, we can use our spells and thaumaturge abilities that have a range of touch on that ally at a range of 30 feet. And that ally can use all of their spells that have a range of touch on us at a range of 30 feet. Which means our touch spells from our scrolls that don't target enemies are going to be much more effective. Then we will want to pick up Seeker of Truths. That will give us a domain spell from a list. And we want to pick up the Knowledge Domain here. That will give us the Scholarly Recollection Focus spell. So, as a reaction, we can roll a Perception check or a Recall Knowledge check twice and take the better results. At level 5, we get our second implement, and we're going to go with the wand implements. After all, we're not always going to have scrolls to work with, so this will give us another option we can use when we don't have scrolls. Plus, this is a good way to do elemental damage without using any resources. And we also get an ancestry feat, which we're going to take Expanded Luck. This allows us to use cast luck on any saving throw rather than just reflex saves. So, more defense, which is always helpful. For the first teamwork report, this build is going to require a lot of downtime, especially at low levels. We don't get free scrolls yet, which means downtime to make scrolls is going to be very important for this build. And we'll need downtime for another reason in this build, which I'll talk about later. So before you play this build, make sure you talk to your GM about how much downtime there's going to be. But all that downtime is going to be well worth it when we can literally cast any spell in the game, as long as we have a scroll for it. But I wouldn't just take a bunch of attack spells either. You're going to want to look at your party and what you're going to be facing that day if you know about it, and prepare scrolls accordingly. Most of the time though, you won't be using Exploit Vulnerability. The main issue with Exploit Vulnerability in this build is that it only applies to our weapon and unarmed attacks. And we want to be casting spells from scrolls most of the time. So Recall Knowledge is the action you want to use. But that does not mean we can't use Esoteric Lore on those Recall Knowledge checks. Especially to find out the weaknesses of creatures. Especially once we get the Adept benefit for our wand. Of course, we do want to focus mainly on our tome to help us with those Recall Knowledge checks. But eventually we will get the Adept benefit for our wand, so that will help a lot. At level 6, we'll take Scroll Esoterica to get our first temporary scrolls. Then Scholarly Defense will give us a little more defense against aberrations and oozes. Know-It-All will make us even better at Recall Knowledge than we already are. And since we're already going to need a lot of downtime for this build, we might as well also take the Ritualist Dedication. That will give us some rituals that we can do during downtime as well. At level 9, Shared Luck will allow us to use Cast Luck on allies, but only for reflex saves. So if an ally gets caught in our firewall or something, we can use this on them, and hopefully they'll at least succeed on their saving throw. Then we'll pick up Share Weakness, so that when we do use our Exploit Vulnerability, an ally can take advantage of it as well. And of course, Efficient Rituals will allow us to use rituals quicker. We'll also want to pick up the Resourceful Ritualist skill feats. This will allow us to cast rituals that we normally wouldn't be able to. At level 12, we'll pick up Elaborate Scroll Esoterica for even more temporary scrolls. Then we'll pick up Flexible Ritualist to reduce the burden on our allies from our rituals. For our level 13 Ancestry feat, I've gone with Black Cat Curse. So when the boss succeeds on their saving throw against one of our spells, we can make them re-roll it and take the worst results. But only once per day. Trespass Teleportation will allow us and our allies to teleport with an enemy that tries to do so. So enemies that can teleport away won't be able to get away from the party. Or rather, at least some of them until we can take Ubiquitous Weakness, which won't be for a while. But for now, Speedy Rituals will let us cast our rituals even quicker. And at 15th level, we get our third implement. Which you can go with any implement you want here, because we already have the 2 implements that we're going to need for this build. At level 16, we'll take 7-Part Link. This allows us and all of our allies to use touch spells and abilities at a range of 30 feet. On all allies. No longer does anyone have to spend an action moving up in order to use a touch spell on allies. Advanced Seeker of Truth will give us the Know the Enemy focus spell, allowing us to use a reaction on our initiative to recall knowledge and roll it twice and take the better results. Our last Ancestry feat for this build is going to be Reliable Luck, allowing us to use cast luck once per hour instead of once per day. Then for level 18, we're going to go with Grand Scroll Esoterica for even more temporary scrolls. Then Lore Finder will allow us to cast Locate as an innate occult spell once per day, allowing us to find scrolls more easily. At level 20 is when we'll take Ubiquitous Weakness, allowing all of our allies to exploit the enemy's weaknesses. And the last feat for this build is going to be Incredible Recollection, allowing us to use 5 recall knowledge checks instantly. But none of our other abilities apply to these recall knowledge checks. Alright, for Teamwork Report number 2. Now we have a lot more temporary scrolls, but we're still going to need a lot of downtime, as we only get a certain amount of temporary scrolls per day. And of course we gotta deal with our rituals as well. Of course, we will probably find some scrolls in our adventures, but we still want to be good at crafting and have magical crafting so we can make scrolls on our own. Because we don't want to rely on the GM to give us the scrolls we want. And don't forget that touch spells that we use on allies are definitely viable thanks to 7-part link. Overall though, this is definitely a ranged build. That means staying back and casting spells from our scrolls, using our wand, and if it comes down to it, using a bow. But if you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like and go ahead and leave me a comment about what you think of this build. And of course, if you want a Google Sheet for this build and a bunch of other builds, you can check out the Patreon page in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see ya next time.